So if that's your preference or your context, you can do whatever. Like I said, I do a little bit of everything and I'm okay with that. So I do a little, get every form of the verb. They could be having 5 forms, and so they just have to find 5 forms. I find verbs a little tricky only because, not only because, but then they're just kind of identifying. Tense is fun. Tense is like, okay, yo form, like first person, present tense, find 5 of those, because when it just says like find all 5 forms of the verb, they're pretty matchy, at least in Spanish. So in maybe a non, maybe a language that's different from Spanish, and that they can't just go, oh, I see verbs that all start with a T, and we've only seen to have, so it's like tengo, tienes, tiene, tenemos, tienen. They don't really actually have to think about anything to be able to do that. It's like when a listening comprehension is just a hearing test. So they heard fantastico and they're like, oh, great, fantastic. Like, yeah, but what was fantastic? Or they fall for it because that's one of the distractor options. It's like, well, that's kind of not fair. What's the actual task? So I find verb matchy, not so much. Verbs in context, absolutely. So stick some verbs in that deck. Again, these are the ones that I just write directly, like with Sharpie on a deck of cards. Cards are, 50 cents a piece or whatever at the dollar store. So I have 8 to 9 decks per unit. That way you can pull them out and just have a different objective, or get more than that. I say 8 to 9 because I usually have 8 to 9 groups in my classroom. So they can group up pretty much 4 in a group. They usually go bigger, 4 in a group, and they're pretty safe. Eventually, a lot of the decks will get muddled together, and like this one, you can't tell in the picture. It's super oversized. It barely fits in the box, which means it totally has like a deck and like a half of another deck, which means one of the little shrimpy decks in my cabinet in my classroom is missing like 30 cards. So it's whatever. Eventually, they all get shuffled together, and that's kind of fun for a review unit. It's not on purpose, but here, we're just going to throw all the words together. Figure it out, man. So it's fun for multiple purposes, but I love it because playing cards are pretty obvious. As long as you've written on there neatly. This is not my most neat handwriting, and I will say once in a while they're like, what is this? And it stops play, and then I'm irritated because I think my handwriting's fine, and then whatever. Being totally honest. Full disclosure, per usual. So I love writing directly on cards. Also, I'm not a huge laminator of cards because I find myself frustrated with manipulatives because inevitably one goes missing. And inevitably you put them in the little baggies and you have a little system. And again, if you're like, where was that torch and that pitchfork? Don't bother. I totally get it. I was good at manipulatives for a long time. I'm not anymore because I just don't. It's just not a thing I'm going to keep track of. So I either print them out every time and just have one set, and then when we're done, like recycle them. Or use regular playing cards. I just don't bother laminating them anymore because it's also a lot of lamination, and I don't have a student aid anymore. That used to be really fun when I was like, oh yeah, Cody, go cut lamination. But now I'm not worried about it. So I just buy the really cheap sets of cards at the dollar store, and I move on with my life. And then, like I said, if you get a mixed pile, well, now you can make it intentional. But I find playing cards, because of their nature, are slicker and easier to work with. And obviously they come in the box, and it's like just one less thing, one fewer thing that I have to do. So card games, I love. I also like using codes for card games, such as, let me find one here, such as this one. So if they need like imaginary scenarios or things like that, this is great without having to write on the playing cards. So you could make just like a key or a legend for the task that they have to do. And this is just a really simple, kind of silly Spanish 1 task. The suit decides how they get to the place. The number or the letter decides where they go. And then who they get to go with is decided by the color. So basically, like, somebody in the group just passes out playing cards, and then it's like 3, 2, 1, and then they turn it over, and then they either have to say or write where they have to go, or where they're going to go, or where they want to go. And then afterwards they could illustrate it, they could quiz, show somebody else the illustrations, have somebody else decide like, oh, it looks like you're going, depending on the verb structure. That's why I said have to, want to, need to, just are going, wherever. This focus was like, I'm going. And so they were sort of silly imaginative scenarios. And I say silly because some of them were like, I'm going to the club on my bike alone. And it was like, oh, tree stay. They didn't sound like real sexy evenings out. So that was kind of entertaining. Sometimes it's fun to make them like a place they have to go. Like, listen, your mom says you have to go here. Or, your friend set you up on a blind date. Here's where you're going. Oh, you're going by yourself. So maybe only put black cards in that deck. And that way they have to go with somebody. So it's kind of fun, but basically you just change, this is a screenshot, so it looks a little bit blurry, but I just made it in a Word document and you just can change like what each thing means. So there's your key, fresh cards, no need to write on any of them, no need to do anything. You just post or display or hand out a copy of the legend here, the key, and they have to decide, what to do. And then from there, turn it into like, all right, now quiz each other. Where are you going? Oh, I'm going here. Or like I said, illustrate them, write them, make like their own little pretend teacher answer key. And then they give the illustrations to a classmate and see if they can figure out where they're going. So it's just kind of a fun way to keep them thinking, but also to keep the scenarios fresh. You can only do so many practice exercises that are like, I'm going to the movies. Because again, even things like practice exercise is going to make somebody mad, but it's not communicative. So how can we, again, especially if we have to hit a lot of grammar, how can we hit some of those structures and make them a little bit more imaginative? So I love playing cards, love playing cards, and have way too many sets of them. Like I said, eventually you just have to scratch some and go, I just got to throw these out. I don't even know what these words are anymore. It's just a hodgepodge of all the words, but that can be fun for an upper level. Especially if you just separate them into nouns or separate them into verbs, or just figure out, what kind of hodgepodge deck you're dealing with. That can be kind of fun. So I usually get fresh-ish decks every couple of years or at the beginning of the year sometimes. If you have a student aid, you can just give them a vocab list and, they can copy them down. But anyway, work it out however you want. So I'll attach the links to these resources that you can buy from these wonderful vendors for spoons. And then also I will put the screenshot of this as well as best I can, the comments and so on. That way you can see kind of like get an example. I also have, don't worry about the fact that it says the sex game. I also have a game here that I got from Keith Toda, sex in Latin. He tells me is six. And so this is the sex game and it's really fun. I don't think you can hear this sound, but I'll try it anyway. So actually I'll go ahead and mute it. This is my class last year playing the sex game. And so basically we call it SACE. And so basically the students have one paper. Again, we're talking low prep, no prep. So it could just be like a blank vocabulary sheet or a blank story rewrite. Whatever works for you, wherever you are. Starts with one person. There's one piece of paper and one writing utensil per group. One die for them to roll. And then you rock and roll. They have to roll a 6. And so one person starts writing, either filling in the vocabulary sheet or writing the story or adding their own details, whatever it is they're doing, as the person after them is rolling the die. As they're rolling, they're looking for a 6. When they get a 6, they're like, sweet, grab the pencil and the paper from that person, and then they continue where they left off. Meanwhile, the die passes and goes to the next person. So I'll also link this explanation in here. And when I say low prep, no prep, I mean it is real active. All you need is like one piece of paper for a group, and you just pull out the dice, die here, die here, die here, and that's it. Then they have a writing utensil, and it's just like rock and roll. It is so much fun, and it gets kids working together, and it also gets them seeing kind of like, okay, you got to here, all right, hurry up. And it saves them sometimes, if they're like, oh, I don't want to be the one. Oh, darn, you rolled a 6. And, kind of take some of the pressure off of like, come on, especially if they're feeling insecure or feeling like they don't contribute well to the group. Maybe that'll be short-lived. So that's kind of cool. The 6 game is so much fun. I love it. And I love it because it's no prep, low prep. We might actually play that tomorrow. Trying to think about how I can add on tomorrow, make it a little bit more active in December because, oh my gosh, December. Again, back to like dice. I love dice games, and this is another one of my favorites that can easily turn into a writing activity. It's a speaking activity, but it can easily turn into the writing activity. You get 2 dice total, and roll the dice. That is the limit of words that they have to say about themselves in a self-description. So I think sometimes we give students minimums I like to give students maximums. Like, don't do the speaking assessment for longer than a minute, because then suddenly they're like fitting as much as they can into a minute. And you realize they've said a lot more because they're like, oh, I only have a minute, instead of, I have to talk for a whole minute. And then it's like whining, and then we're irritated because we know how quickly a minute goes. But I like to give them limits. Don't go crazy. Don't go over a minute. So same thing. If they rolled, for example, 9 here, you only get 9 words to say something about your family or about your house or about what you're going to do tomorrow, or, I'm thinking AP themes, what beauty means to you, or what you think. I mean, like the list is endless. And it's so funny because then you'll see them walking around like these videos. You see them going like,
oh, okay, good.
I like to play soccer. Haha, 5 words about myself. Obviously that was in English, but you can see them, counting and going like, okay. They'll also start adding in their name, like, I am Jordan and I like cheese. It's like, we know your name. They're like, I know, but I needed 3 more words. And in Spanish, me llamo Jordan, so they also love like, see you later at the end. Me llamo Jordan. Hasta luego. And it's like, darn you. But you did it, and then it also, you can see them thinking about things that they can say in just 2 words. And it's, August 10th, or like these videos are like September 13th. So they were talking about themselves. Super fun. And all of a sudden, when you look at the clock in December, have I mentioned how hard December is? When you look at the clock in December and you still have, like 10 minutes left in class, it's a great one to be like, oh, great. We have time to get to my last activity. I'm so excited, when really you're like, phew, and you can have the dice just like in your desk drawer. And it's like, all right, you need, 2 dice per group and whatever. It can seem kind of planned, but really it is. I mean, if you've played it a couple of times, then they're like, oh, okay, cool. Now to take it a step further, they can write them down. You need at least 10, or they write them down, switch papers, and the second person has to then like create questions for these answers. So it just went from like speaking to writing, then to like kind of interpersonal, because they could kind of ask and answer then. So if they roll the dice, get 6, my name is Meredith. I'm cool. There we go. There's 6. I write down, my name is Meredith. I'm cool. Does a contraction count? I guess so. I'm cool. Then once I had 10, random number, once I had 10 or 15 of those, trade papers with somebody. Now they're reading, I am Meredith. I am cool. And they're making a question. What's your name? What are you like? And so on. So that's what I mean by that. So it could upcycle it, recycle itself into several more activities. And again, it's literally no prep. Like, it came from students' minds, and it puts the onus on them to be able to do the thing and, own the material. If you can't say something about yourself in 5 words, that's a pretty minimal task, or 9 words or whatever. And they'll laugh really hard when somebody rolls like 2 6s. They're like 12, but they know that it's no more than 12 words. The worst case scenario is 12, and the best case scenario is 2. 2 is hilarious. Soy Meredith. And they kind of look at you and you're like, man, come on. But it gets them thinking. And again, it was original and in the moment. So for kids, it kind of differentiates itself, but it also like evens the playing field. And even your most struggling student can do 2 words worth or 4 words worth, and that's when they get tricky. Because sometimes those are the schemers too already by default, like, me llamo Meredith, adios. Like, how'd you make the most basic thing into like 4 words? Darn you. But it's awesome. So I've got some videos. I can link these videos from Twitter as well. That's one of my favorites. There's no name for it. It just exists. And it's a fun little time filler. But like I said, it can also be fun as a diving board of sorts, a springboard into, whatever your next thing is. Shoot, then it could be making up a story, make up a little scenario, and you only get 5 sentences, and 5, whatever you roll within those 5 sentences, poof, there's your story. You better start it and end it within 5 sentences in that many words, which is super cool. Then pick the best story, photocopy it for tomorrow, blah, 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 add some of those comprehension questions. Once you get your story, you need 5 comprehension questions, and we're going to pick the most interesting one, to be like a class quiz tomorrow. That's really fun. And then you monitor, but you didn't have to do anything. But you just had to teach them the things and then give them a space to use it and to be creative with it. To that same sort of notion, Jeopardy. We know how Jeopardy works. And Martina Bex and amazing people like that have games that they've made available and that they sell resources for called the Unfair Game. So I took the Unfair Game one day, and I can link in the link to her explanation for the Unfair Game. I took the Unfair Game one day and then so you give the game questions as statements. Basically, for the Unfair Game, you assign a point number for every question, all the way up to whatever, positive 20 points, all the way down to negative 25, whatever, as horrible or as amazing as you want to be. I like to be pretty horrible. So, and so the questions are all statements. I make my true false question. So each group chooses. Group 2, what question number would you like? And they have no idea what the point values are. So it's like, okay, número 5. I'm like, great, number 5. Está lloviendo y hace frío. And the story that this particular story did in Spanish one doesn't say anything about rain. So, or like the weather. And so they're like, falso. And it is false. I'm like, okay, do you want to keep the points or do you want to give away the points? They still don't know how many points yet. We'll keep the points. Good choice. Positive 1. Great. And then you're keeping score. So these questions are set as statements, and then I like to do the true false. What's different about this then is and then you go on and keep playing. They can give the points to other teams, and they can give negative 25 to other teams before they even realize it. They can keep them and go, yeah, we'll keep the points. Negative 25 again. Once you've given all the game question statements as answers, then give them a copy or show or display. I literally just project a picture of it because I'm too lazy to type them into slides. I just wanted to handwrite them and be done. Display them somehow, and then have students pick like 5 or 10, and they work to formulate the questions. Like, what was the question that made that the answer? So if number 5 says, it's raining and it's cold, the question that would ask that is, what was the weather like? What's the weather like? How's the weather in the story, in the context? And so it's super fun. No really prep except for the questions, which really could just be parts of the text. You could just go through a story and like number them. And then they can't use any resources. These took it a little bit further. So they could use their resources on their team and be looking like, okay, is Caroline, talented and smart? Oh, that's right. It says she studies a lot and gets good grades. I guess we could take that as like smart. You can have kind of take a little bit further instead of being directly from the text, or they can be directly from the text. But again, it's like no prep, low prep, and you can keep it going. I think we use a lot of games and we get a lot of pressure to like use games and be fun and be engaging. But sometimes from that, I just hear use more resources, like make more stuff. And that's like kind of overwhelming. Like, I don't want to make another thing. I already make so many things. So they could just be like, there'd be like a little exit card. This is just a picture of their little exit card. So I took those questions. And again, this isn't a graded thing. I'm just stamping. I'm like, yep, good. Unless it wasn't, then I didn't stamp that one. But these were all like, me gusta approved on top here. So, it said where they were from. They labeled the question number that they asked and then as that they were referring to. And then it's like, oh, must have said Parker was from so-and-so. Where's he from? Or where are you from? How old are you? How old is Caroline? This is early in Spanish 1, August 15th. This is a weekend. So, they're doing their best. So it's really, really fun. And again, no prep, low prep. I just already had the story. And there you go. You just put some little point values on the side and rock and roll from there. So once again, in conclusion, these are just some ideas of some no prep, low prep. And I'm making sure if I left any. No, that was it. Low prep, no prep games that I love and that I go to all of the time. And so former students will walk by and say, oh, are you guys playing the dice game? I love that game. And they're just really predictable. And then you can still get creative within them and take it to the next level. Okay, now, let's add this, or take the last time you played, now switch papers, make those sentences you wrote, embellish them somehow or add a detail. And it's really fun. So anyways, see you guys on Twitter and let me know if you have any questions.